we're all familiar with the volunteer group who comes in to plant trees, crash about in the brash, haul out, have a jolly good fire and a barbecue at the end of it, and swing a bill hook and hopefully go home with all the limbs that they came into the site with. And that's totally satisfying, and there'll always be demand for that kind of engagement. But as I mentioned earlier, these communities are beginning to ask serious questions about what we as professionals are deciding to do with their environments. And remember, generally speaking, we are a temporary resource that a woodland such as this has available to it in terms of the professionals. We will come, do a project, spend the money, and chances are we'll go away. And the people who are left, having allowed you in with all your wacky ideas and your impractical perspectives and your degree of unrealism about what is achievable and what you're going to leave them with, are going to be stuck with it at the end of the day. So it's really, really important that you consciously think about the relationship you're going to have with this local community, and at the very least you establish respectful and egalitarian relationships, because each has their own role to play, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to hear your views on that. The other challenge for us, and again people have been saying to us this in Epping Forest and in the National Forest, is you can't just do it as a one-off. You've got to put in place mechanisms which allow the continuous engagement of new generations. It's okay, you know, if you were a kid and you went and planted your tree 20 years ago, and you can bring your kids back to show them the tree that you planted. But where is the opportunity for them to engage with the woodland in that way? How do you set up mechanisms to allow continuous engagement?
I think if you want to get people to do the volunteer work, you don't talk to them or say to people, we've got this X amount of money, we want to get this done, we want to get that done, come and do it. You know, you say, look, we've got this opportunity, there's this plan and we can do this, would you like to be part of it?
You've got to be really careful that you don't just give out the tablet to the community and say, take this because it's going to make you feel better. Because as professionals, we have all the answers. We'll listen to you.
And they all have good communication skills.
But what is a community? Define a community. You've used that over and over again. Look at us around here, the Neroche project. We've got very local people. We've got people that come from the other side of the valley.
Yeah.
What communities are we talking about? Those that live here, or the communities that use the wood? The walkers, the runners, the orienteers?
That's your hardcore, isn't it? That's your hardcore.
I don't know.
Community.
No, that's what
it's everybody who shares this as a part of their environment that they live in and respond to.
You can be inclusive and exclusive by using that word community. And for as many as you include, you'll exclude an awful lot more.
Well, you can talk.
Well, you might not realise there's an awful lot that does happen that goes on, and a lot around estate management and estate practices that never involves volunteers in a discussion of this type. So just say, applaud yourselves for involving volunteers in the sort of circle that's here, because often when projects are being designed and community is being involved, and it's sort of, how can we involve volunteers in this project, it will be the last thing that's discussed after we need 30 grand to remove these trees on the edge that are a problem because we've got some problem with a neighbour. That's actually what they're looking for, and then we'll build some community involved. Actually, they don't involve volunteers at that stage. They'll just design a package that then goes out. I think things are improving. We see a lot of improvements in the way we work, but still there's an awful lot of pressure on understaffed estate teams to get a lot of work done, and so they'll only look for very narrow volunteer involvement. They'll look for very a set skill base, a set type. They're not as ambitious and involving as they could be, and it's really nice that I see some projects coming through that have got all kinds of volunteer involvement in.
There are different types of volunteers, aren't there? They come in with an expectation and a set of skills, and sometimes people, what they want to do is they're happy to do the paperwork, happy to get that organised, and then hand it on to somebody else, and then you need other volunteers to do, right, they don't want to get involved with the paperwork, thanks very much, they want to be doing the hard work, and not hard work, both hard work in a different kind of way, but you know, they want to do the physical stuff out, you know, and so you've got to find different volunteer groups for the different jobs. Otherwise, because not everyone wants to do.
The process is important, though, isn't it? How do you go about getting to know your volunteers? What their expectations?
I think you've got to look at what you're asking for in the first place. If you set up a volunteer group, or you find a need for a volunteer group, you've got to say, well, what are we looking for? If you just say we want volunteers, the volunteers go, well, what do you want? What do you really want? If you say we want volunteers and we need somebody who can do this, we need somebody who can do the paperwork, we need somebody who can organise, who would like to organise the group a little bit, and you want somebody who is actually just happy to come along with the bow saw and, you know,
so
do whatever.
Form really is.
So if you don't ask,
function,
you don't get.
So you've got to work out the tasks to be done. And then you advertise for those to come forward.
You can't go, oh, we need volunteers, get some volunteers and work out what you're going to do. You can't do that. You've got to have it all.
And that's not rocket science. I mean, in the voluntary, if you look at voluntary sector models and kind of, you know, stuff that's been around for 30, 40, longer than that, that's how people who manage voluntary sector organisations where they've got volunteers doing particular tasks will work. But there's something different.
But how do you sell your role as a professional? Trust me, I'm a professional. All sorts of connotations. How do you sell that to the community? Because you've got to go in and say, we can do this for you. And people go, ooh, government quango.
So what we're saying is that there's an important dialogue. There's a dialogue of people who need things done with the people who may have the interest or inclination or the skills to help them achieve what they want to do, and you've got to find a forum where that dialogue, you explaining the scope of the work that you'd like to see.
Is it a manipulation or is it a negotiation?
It matters not. You have a goal in mind.
You meet your needs and we meet ours, don't we? It's like a volunteer is motivated to volunteer to meet a certain need of their own, and if that happens to meet the organisation's needs,
brilliant.
There's a match, isn't there? Great.
And in the projects that you've been involved in, has that been worked out between two parties amicably over time, or have you fallen out, or how have you resolved your differences?
At the moment, I'm coming along because the work that's on offer is of interest, but there's an edge on me, always wanting to get a bit more deeply involved, but not having any idea how I can get more deeply involved.
Yeah. I think it's really important there's a really open dialogue between the people who are paid, the professionals, and I would just like to put in a plug that actually many of us before we were paid were volunteers.
The volunteers are on the back foot now, aren't they? And you've got to take the initiative. You've got to open the channels. You've got to open up lines of communication, encouraging your volunteers to come forward and say, hey, I'm up for this. Yeah. So I think that's your role. And but how you find the volunteers in the first place is another matter.
I wonder whether there's a sort of change in terms of roles and perceptions, in that I think there is this gradual shift towards enabling people to be more involved in making decisions and being more involved in, like in your case, I wonder whether there's a situation where the Commission's always sort of been that paternalistic organisation and in charge and has always managed the contracts and taken charge and made the decisions. And maybe there's not been that communication or understanding that's been conveyed to sort of say, well, actually, we're sort of your puppets in a way to help you deliver what the community or the people in the local area or the users want to achieve, and we're happy to help you or give you that responsibility and support you where you need some help. I think it sort of needs to happen on both sides, but because we're working in these traditional mindsets still, but there's a gradual shift in terms of power and responsibility, feeling confident to sort of say, actually, I've got these skills, I want to do more, I can do more.
I've found sometimes if I want to involve community groups in the work that we're doing, that what is to actually identify a pre-existing group within the community that has a similar agenda, and then there are other things we do as well, but one of the easiest groups I've found to go through is actually schools. Schools have certain agendas, and I found recently through the schools that they then invite their families, and it has a knock-on effect of people say, oh, an amount of people that we've worked with now said, I didn't know you could come into these woods. Are we allowed in? You know, and it's breaking that down. But one of the groups that I found most useful is schools, going through schools. But I've also, I don't know if anyone else has found this, that I found in the last 2 years or so that the nature of volunteering, certainly sort of where I am at Killerton, which is a National Trust building just sort of about 5 miles from Exeter, that I used to have sort of mostly retired people because they've got time. But now I'm finding I'm getting a lot of young graduates who are job seeking. So in the last 2 years, I would say that my ratio of sort of in terms of age, I'd say sort of 2 years ago, 95% of my volunteers were 65 plus. And now I'd say that's about 60-40. I'd say about 40% of my volunteers now are actually working age people looking for work. And therefore the nature of what we offer in terms of volunteering is having to shift and adapt to that. In that we're now looking at, okay, how can we build your skills for the workplace?
I mean, it's an interesting point that you raise, because I think custom and practice would be that volunteers actually don't like to feel as if they need educating, and they're certainly not necessarily up for formal training.
It's not about formal qualifications. I don't want a certificate. I don't want any more ologies. I've got ologies coming at me, whatever. And to be honest with you, the divide that you're creating by suggesting professionals and AA and others is horrendous. What you ought to be looking at is saying, perhaps an explanation here about why we're doing this might help you understand why you're up to your youngsters in a wet bog when it's lashing down with rain, and we just need a bit of an explanation about why we're there. I don't want a certificate that says you're a grade 1.
Yeah, the BTCV approach would be to sit everybody down at the beginning and do exactly what you've just described.
That's achievable, definitely, but it's hard work, and often it's the full-time work of a member of staff with funding and time and the opportunity to go out and start that legwork. And not every organisation has that luxury. Certainly within ours, only certain pockets of the department have that luxury, and it shows, because actually it takes a lot of time to be able to be responsive, to be able to listen, to take the time, get the feedback, and make changes in the organisation to make the adaptations that we need to make to keep up with you guys.
But we volunteers offer you a low-cost way of achieving a long-term goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we are a resource that's well worth investing in.